Hey everyone, and welcome to the Mae Cave. My name is Megan, and today I am going to tell you all about how my reading goals went for 2018. Now, you may know at the beginning of the year I had set reading goals for myself, and so let's see how I did. I wrote them all down in this sketchbook, so I'm going to be reading out of this for this. I have a total of 9 goals to go through, and I know I didn't complete all of them, but we'll see. We'll go through them one at a time. So the first goal was to read more series on my shelf, more, series instead of standalones or anything. I didn't do so well. All the series I had finished in 2019, which were only 3, I had started either in 2017 or there was one that I started in 2016. So I read the Taj Mahal trilogy by Indu Sundarensan. That one I started in November of 2017 and I finished the 3rd book in January of 2018. So that kind of counts. And then I read the Earth's Children series by Jean M. Auel. This is the Clan of the Cave Bear, those books. I think I started that in 2016, read the 5th book in 2018, and then kind of read the 6th book in 2018 and hated it, DNF'd it, made a rant series, review about that series. If you're interested in those books, I have a spoilery review that's where I rant about the books, and then a non-spoilery review where I just talk about them. And I did enjoy the first books, but I'll get to that in that other video if you're interested in that. And then the 3rd series I did finish is the Zoe Goldman trilogy by Sandra Block. This is like a mystery thriller kind of series, and the main character is actually a psychiatrist, which is pretty cool. I read the 3rd book in 2018. The first 2 books I read in 2017. But that's it for series. So I'm going to count this as not what I had imagined. I had imagined actually trying to pick up more series off my shelf, and I ended up just finishing the ones I was in and didn't pick up any more. So, or at least I haven't finished any more. I think I've picked up a few little ones here and there, but I know I picked up the Inkheart trilogy, read the first 2 books last year in 2017, and have not gotten to the 3rd book yet just because it's so big. I'll probably save that until the summer of 2019. But that was the first goal, so I'm going to say that one I did not complete, not to what I had wanted it to be. Goal number 2 is to read all recently acquired books by new authors. I had a specific list for this. I had a list of 7 books. And out of those 7, I read 5 of them. So the 2 I did not read are Cake Therapist by Judith Fertig and Architects of the Gifted, The Scarlet Reaper by Cameron Cross, who is a YouTuber, and I can link him down below. Speaking of that, if there are any YouTubers or Instagrammers or people I found on social media that I talk about in this video, I will link them down below. So the 5 books I did read that were newly acquired at the time: Robert Michael's Demon in the Tree by Ben Sanders, who is an author-tuber and a booktuber. Astrodiac by Eric J. Kitchen, who I found on Instagram, but his Instagram is no longer there, and all the indications in the book are there are definitely going to be a 2nd book. I saw something about it online, but he's kind of not active right now, so that might be a few years out. Emotions by Arnie Cantarero. I found online. His book I thought was okay. He's coming out with the 2nd one, but I enjoyed it. Hobo Stew by Naomi Jackson, who I did find on Instagram. I really like her a lot. I read her most recently released a book, there we go, called Otherworld, Book of Things That Are. And then finally, Step-Spinsters by Madina Papadopoulos. This one, I love this one. It's a Cinderella retelling, and I also found her on Instagram, so I'll link her down below. So out of the 7, I read 5. So for me, I'm going to count that as completed because the 2 books I did not read, I kind of lost interest in. And I may read them later. I just didn't have any interest for this year, but they're still on my shelf, so we'll see. I'm going to count that as completed, though, for what I was expecting. Goal number 3 was to read a book for every letter of the alphabet by author's last name. I actually found this on Book Riot. They had an article listing goals you could do for the year, and that was one of them. So out of that, there were only, I think, 10 letters I did not get. So this is not, of course, all of the authors. I only picked 1 book per letter. So if I had more than 1 book that had an author whose last name started with A, I'm only going to pick 1 author. So there obviously are going to be, I know there are a few authors whose last name started with O and a few that started with B or something, but I only picked 1 book per letter. So for A, I read Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood. B, Year of Wonders by Geraldine Brooks. For C, Beginning of the World in the Middle of the Night by Jen Campbell. D, Afghan Wife by Cindy Davies. E, Carpet Makers by Andreas Eschbach. F, Chocolate Chip Cookie Murder by Joanne Fluke. I did not read anything for G. Oh, actually, there's 1 book I read for G, but it's on my nonfiction goal, and I tried not to read more books. I said not to myself that I wouldn't mix goals, so if a book was on the nonfiction list, it wouldn't count for this alphabet list, or if it was on that newly acquired list that I read, then it wouldn't count for this list either. So I think there is actually a book for G, but otherwise, for this particular goal, there's not. H, Brothers of Baseball by Christopher Hellmeister. There's nothing for I. J, Hobo Stew by Naomi Jackson. There's nothing for K. L, Bride of Dreams by Amara Luciano. M, Winter People by Jennifer McMahon. Nothing for N. O, By Royal Appointment by A. O'Connor. P, Step-Spinsters by Madina Papadopoulos. There's nothing for Q. R, The Kitty Hawk Books by Ian Reading. S, Court Dancer by Kyung-Suk Shin. There's nothing for T. U, Gunner's Daughter by Sigrid Undset. I have nothing for U, W, X, or Y. And then finally Z, The 13th Princess by Diane Zoller. The funny thing is, for Z, I had actually planned on reading Loteria by Zambrano, but I read 13th Princess instead and never even got to Loteria this year, so that's okay. I think overall I got the majority of what I wanted. And part of the reason I didn't complete all of these is because of nursing school, as you guys probably know by now. So I'm going to count that one as completed. And it's not on my goals for 2019, but I think like in the background, I'm going to try and read the letters that I didn't get to because some of them were hard to get to. So Q, I think I may have one or two authors on my entire shelf whose last name starts with Q. For I know that I only have 2 authors whose last name starts with I on my shelf, one of which the book I already got rid of because I already read it. And the other one, I've read all of her books, so those will be rereads, and I'm trying to not do rereads this year, so I had to buy a book whose authors start with I. Alright, on to the next. Goal number 4 was to choose 5 books whose titles share one word in common. And I had actually gotten halfway there. I have 3 books that share one word in common. If I can get to the page. So I ended up going with the word red because I forgot about this until halfway through the year. So the first one is Lady of Chiaoku, Red Bird of South China. Number 2 is Red Rising by Pierce Brown. And number 3 is Red Tea by Meg Mazersky. Now 4 and 5 I actually had books picked out for this, but I didn't get to them in 2018. Number 4 would have been Woman in Red by Eileen Gouge, which I just started yesterday and I'm currently reading for 2019. And 5 was Red Queen by... I don't know who it's by, but I saw it on my shelf and it seemed interesting enough to pick up soon, but I ended up not getting to those 2 books, so I'm going to count that one as not completed because I could have picked up those books, but I didn't. But it's okay. You know, I think so far I'm doing pretty well. Goal number 5 was to read 1 nonfiction book per month, and I think I did decent for that. So I read one for January. January I actually DNF'd that book, and then the one for January I read, Confessions of a Surgeon by Paul Ruggieri, and I didn't like it, so I DNF'd it about a quarter of the way in. February, I read Behind the Palace Doors by Michael Farquhar, I think. March, I did not read a nonfiction because I was participating in 2 different readathons, the Cozy Readathon and, March Mystery Madness and Middle Grade March. So I was reading books for those, and I wanted to get as much of those as I could, so I didn't read any nonfiction for March. And then in April, I read Africa, An Artist's Safari by Fred Krakowiak. In May, I read On Blondes by Joanna Pittman. In June, I read Qian Yin by Martin Palmer and 2 others. This one is it's specifically about one goddess from China. July, I read A Voyage Long and Strange by Tony Horowitz. That one is about explorers who came to the Americas that weren't Columbus or the Pilgrims between those 2, which was a pretty cool book. August, Ways of the Samurai by Carol Gaskin, which was the G book that I had talked about. September, Outfoxing Fear, Folktales from Around the World by Kathleen Reagan. And then October, Under the Black Flag by David Cordingley. And I did have 2 books I was going to read for November and December. The first one was Fearless Girls, Wise Women, and Beloved Sisters, also by Kathleen Reagan, which is another story collection of stories from around the world. And I just couldn't get into it. After the first 2 stories, I was so bored. I did not want to continue reading it. So I gave up and I started reading that one in December, and then I just gave it away. And then the other book was a book about Italy. I don't remember what it was called, but editing me will remember and put it up here. That one I found out was one, like the second of a duology that you don't technically have to read together, but I like to read them that way. So instead I gave it to my mom, who I know wouldn't care and just likes the things about Italy, and I just wasn't going to read it anytime soon. So especially not for the end of 2018. So I think for nonfiction, I did pretty well for myself, especially because I started nursing school and all that textbook reading counts as nonfiction, even though I didn't want it to count for the goal that I had. So I'm going to say that that goal was accomplished for what I wanted anyway. The next goal number 6, was to read at least 2 of my 800 plus page books, which did not happen. I didn't read anything probably over 500. I don't think. I definitely didn't read anything over 800, but that's okay. Goal not achieved. Number 7 was to read 10 books set in countries other than my own. This one was a lot easier than I thought it would be. I didn't think it would be hard, but I didn't think I would just have the list like that. There are actually more books than what's on this list that I read that were set in other countries, and I did not count anything that's fantasy because that's technically always set in a country other than my own unless it's urban fantasy. So the books I have for this one are Shadow Princess by Indu Sundarensan, so 3rd book in the Taj Mahal trilogy. That one is set in India in the 1600s. I have Behind the Palace Doors. Actually, I don't know why I put this one on here because it's part of the nonfiction goal, so I shouldn't have put it on there, but I'm sure I could add another book beyond that. The Afghan Wife by Cindy Davies. That one's set in Afghanistan and Iran. Silk by someone who I don't remember. That one's set in France and Japan. Number 5, One Click, which is set mainly in Ireland. Number 6, Year of Wonders by Geraldine Brooks, which is set in England. Number 7, Red Tea, which is set in Japan. 8, Kiranyaga, which is set mainly in Africa, and that one's a sci-fi, not a fantasy, so I counted it. And because it's also set on a planet that they created, like a separate little mini robotic planet, so that kind of counts. But the whole culture around that book is African as well, so it is still a different country. Number 9, Gunner's Daughter, which is set in Norway and Iceland. 10, A Soldier's Wife, which is set in Ireland and India. 11, Court Dancer, which is set in South Korea and France. So, oh look, I had 11 books, and I could have added more, so number 2 I could just take off and it would be 10. So I definitely achieved that goal without even having to think about it. Goal achieved. Number 8 was to read at least 2 books in which the main character's job was to play a part of the main role, which was one I hadn't thought that I would actually achieve. I was just thinking, oh, well, that would be a fun goal to do, and I actually ended up doing it. So first I read The Naturalist by Andrew Mayne, in which the main character's job actually played one of the biggest roles in the book. And then I have Mammoth, in which the main character, it's not necessarily her job, but she wants it to be her job. She's a teenager who wants to be an archaeologist, and that takes the main theme of the book. So I actually completed that goal without having to think about it much, and I'm sure that there are other books on my list that I might put pictures up here, maybe not, I don't know, that would have achieved that goal. And then goal number 9 was to cull my unread books before my bookshelf tour videos, which I did do. I did a whole unhaul. I went through all of these books. I got rid of 113 books, I think, which I did a video for, and I'll link that down below. I'll also link my bookshelf tour videos down below. I think that was a total of 13 videos because I have a lot of bookshelves and a lot of books, and that's a playlist which I can also link down below. But that's it for my goals. I'd like to say that I did pretty well. Out of the 9 goals, I think there were only a few that I counted as not done, not completed. Yeah, there were only 3 that I said that I'm not going to count as completed goals. So I actually think I did pretty good. 3 out of 9. That's less than half that I didn't do. So I'm pretty proud of myself, especially because I went through nursing school and I'm pretty sure that most of these I had gotten before nursing school started, so. But I'm running out of time. I have to get going. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.